You're listening to the Lutheran Ladies Lounge podcast. I'm Sarah.
I'm Erin.
I'm Bree.
And I'm Rachel.
And we get the special privilege of wrapping up book club number 2 today, which means we get to talk about this book that we all read and some cultural significances, which I think is going to be super great because this is a huge part of my own lifestyle personally. And it also means we get to know what the next book club book is. And this is probably my favorite part of these episodes because there's suspense and then we're going to find something out by the end. And I'm so excited.
I love surprises.
I know. It's great. So, Rachel, take it away. What are we discussing today about our book club?
So this is our wrap-up episode for the second book club pick, our first nonfiction pick, and we read Secondhand, Travels in the New Global Garage Sale by Adam Minter. It could also be subtitled, let's see, What Happens to Your Stuff After You Drop It Off at Goodwill? Which is a question that I'd always wondered. And I think for a lot of, the relevance to us as church ladies is church ladies have long been pioneers in the sort of recycling of used clothes and housewares. Most of our churches have rummage sales. We have food banks and clothing banks and diaper drives. And we're huge on helping connect people with stuff they don't need to people who need stuff. But one piece of that is what happens when your rummage sale is over. You pack up all those extra donations. You don't have space to store them at the church. You should go drop them off at Goodwill or Salvation Army or, some other donation center. And then you lose track of them and what happens to them. And that's a huge and very interesting and relevant question for us to consider because it has implications for how we can do a better job of loving our neighbor with secondhand stuff. So that was the book, and I found it really incredibly eye-opening. The author took us on this journey around the world. We went to Japan, we went to Africa, we went down to Mexico, and we just saw all the ways in which secondhand goods, especially he focused on clothing and electronics, take on a second life or don't take on a second life, which is perhaps more concerning. And I learned a lot, had a lot of curiosity sort of satisfied by this book. But I'm curious to know what you guys thought of it. First impressions, what are your immediate takeaways from this?
It filled me with dread.
Wow.
I'm just going to...
That's a raving review.
I'm going to throw it out there. So this book, it spoke to me in particular because in a past life, I worked at a boutique nonprofit resale shop here in the St. Louis area, and just having to man intake and know sort of what goes into assessing value to things, and then, because not everything hits the sales floor.
Right.
And I have to believe that that's not what happens at Goodwill 100% of the time either.
No, it's a small percentage.
So the stuff we didn't put on the rack, we gave to a local Methodist church. I think we had a relationship with them. And it just, I don't know, it fills me with dread because, we must have all of these, stained clothes with, holes in them, just, circulating around society. I don't know, at some point I'm like, just throw it out. It makes me feel so wasteful. I was struck with the sting of the law, within the first chapter.
Yeah, there's a lot of law in this book, for sure. If you're going to pick a law or gospel angle, this is more law than gospel.
Yeah.
There's very little Jesus in this book, let's be honest.
0%.
Although someone does... Oh, is that a spoiler? Someone does find Jesus. Literally.
I enjoyed it. I'm not usually a nonfiction reader. I try and push myself to read nonfiction just because I know it's not my preference. And so I always have more, I don't know. It always I don't know what it is. But anyway, I enjoyed it. It was interesting. There were some stories that helped sort of drive along the bigger picture that he was talking about. So there were some sort of human human storylines that I could follow along with, and I found it challenging in places, and definitely found a few places where it was really challenging some of my my biases that I wasn't even aware of. Brought some of those to light, so that was interesting to me.
I was really looking forward to it going into it because pretty much my entire wardrobe is secondhand clothing. And I'm not afraid to tell people that because when I was growing up, at least, you know, there's a stigma about buying secondhand, or at least there used to be. Millennials may have changed that because we don't have money. But anyway, I don't know.
Well, it's I feel like in vogue for
it's like I shop secondhand because I'm taking care of the world. So I was really interested going into it to know more about the process and the life cycle of clothing, maybe get a better idea of where the clothing that I buy from Goodwill actually comes from and what does happen to the rest of it. Because I buy from Goodwill, I also donate back to secondhand because I kind of take it as an opportunity to rotate through my closet because I'm not spending hundreds of dollars on clothing. I'm spending like 20 or 30, so I can rotate through clothing a lot faster. But what does that actually mean when I'm rotating through my own clothing that quickly? What does that mean for the rest of the life cycle of secondhand clothing? So I think I was most intrigued by all of the cultural influences to the same like types of clothing or the same or articles or stuff. The different cultures have different ways of looking at these items, and they put different values on different pieces of stuff depending on where they are in the world and what their culture collectively thinks about secondhand in general and all of this stuff that kind of comes through the market. So I always like learning about cultures though. So that's the part that really sticks in my head.
Yeah, and I think, looking at some of our readers' first impressions on the book club event page, you see people talking about how relevant this is to them as they're cleaning out, say the home of a loved one who's passed on. Before about 150 years ago, our relationship with stuff was very different. Stuff was precious. Stuff was, made by hand and made to last. And then the Industrial Revolution comes through. And suddenly people have more stuff than they know what to do with. Mm-hmm. And it's a problem that has continued to balloon to this day. And so we as a culture have the very unique challenge of trying to cope with a glut of extra stuff. Mm-hmm. And it just keeps coming. Mm-hmm. One comment that I found during this initial reaction question was, it's someone who works in the museum field, Brittany Shelp on our Facebook page. She says, I work in the museum field, so my relationship with stuff is already very complex, both in my work life and personal life. But I was surprised that this book got me thinking about stuff in a totally different way. And she goes on to talk about her postcard collection, which she's always cherished and enjoyed. And now she's thinking, well, why? Why do we as humans collect stuff? Mm-hmm. Right. So there are lots of larger questions, not just about what happens to your belongings when you drop them off at a donation center, but what is the amount of stuff we have and how we buy it and how we keep it and how we get rid of it, talk about our humanity. So that was a fun aspect of this book. And that's sort of what a lot of our discussion questions in the online book club had to do with. So I'm going to turn it over to each of you in turn, and I would love it if you could pick out one question that we discussed online, and we can talk about it in a little bit greater detail here on air.
One of the questions that was asked in the Facebook group was question number 2. Historically, personal identity revolved around religion, civic participation, and pride of oftentimes small place. But as those traditional bonds disintegrate in the face of industrialization, urbanization, and secularization, brands and objects become a means to curate and project who we are. And for many Americans, objects packed into a home present the complete curated package. Which objects currently in your home communicate something deeply personal about your identity, whether past, present, or aspirational future? What do the things you own say about who you are? That question resonates with me because if you've ever been in my apartment, you would be like, what style is this? Modern circus chic? Like, what?
Modern circus chic.
This is furnished by Barnum and Bailey. Like, I'm very much into, like, interior design and, like, how your home should be a reflection of who you are. So I have a lot of, like, colors and tchotchkes and, you know, fake plants and a corner of my living room for my art table. And it's just it's very colorful. It's unique in a way that I want it to be unique. And it's perhaps most importantly, as it pertains to this question, it's nothing that I would have had growing up. It is not the style of my mother or my grandmother. No one before me.
So your home, full of your carefully curated possessions, is about carving out a unique identity for yourself that sets you apart from others in your life and how you grew up.
That's correct.
So it does. It is a reflection of at least the identity you want to project.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that goes the same for the clothes that we wear for sure. I remember our fun quiz, and if you haven't taken that, go back and find it. Which Lutheran lady are you? We'll post a link in the Facebook group to bring it back to the top for the many new friends who
That was
haven't
a
taken it
while
yet.
ago.
Right.
But, one of the questions in that was, what's your fashion style? And, none of us would just put on a burlap sack and call it good. Or maybe we would and just add some accessories and be very
We would all make it work.
You can wear anything with earrings.
But all of us carefully choose our clothing, our home furnishings. I talked about how I choose the books on my shelf.
Mm-hmm.
I want, the pulp fiction tends to go upstairs, and the, Plutarch's Lives is prominently displayed on my on my bookshelf in the living room. I want people to look at my shelf and say, "Ooh, that's a smart cookie." But I realize that, that's me using stuff to present an identity. And it's just interesting the way that possessions play that role in our lives.
My home experience is almost opposite of Bree's, which I find interesting because we both have a crazy sense of style and color. But my home space, first of all, if you walked into our house, all you see is bikes because we have tons of bikes. So that's an obvious one. A lot of our furniture choices and a lot of the stuff that we have is driven by our grandparents, which is like completely opposite of I think what this book was saying about millennial culture and young people not caring about the stuff that's handed down to them. My house is literally full of furniture from my husband's grandparents. And I'm okay with that.
It should be noted that Sarah and Luther were into grandparent antiques before it was cool.
I love grandparent antiques. So my husband's paternal grandpa made a ton of stuff. So a lot of the stuff that we have is like really quality furniture that he made. And obviously I don't want to get rid of that. Like, that's really cool. And my husband's maternal grandmother lived on a farm and was really into cows, which I think is awesome. So we just have a ton of her like farm tchotchke stuff. Like in one of our hutches that we use is like a display case for a lot of stuff. Like a whole shelf is just full of farm tchotchke because I think it's really cool to like connect back to the past. But I'm also a history nerd, so maybe that plays into it. I don't know.
And for me too, talking about kids cleaning out their parents' homes because they are going to assisted living or they've passed away. I dread the day that I have to do that for my folks because it's like, I don't want any of this. I don't want your tea towels, your china, or like, it's just so extra.
But you don't want to get rid of it either because you feel like you're giving away a part of them. Mm-hmm. You're giving away their past. You're giving away part of their life.
Yep.
Or, disposing of it in some way. And so it's very, stuff is very tightly bound up. Just before we move on to the next question, I want to point out a comment that a couple of readers made about art. Mm. That, we had a few weeks back, the people were sharing their pictures of their crucifixes and their Christian art, and we talked about it in depth here on the show too. How your Christian artwork on the walls, reveals your identity as a believer to everyone that walks in your house. And yet that too, those are carefully curated. I don't have any Thomas Kincaid up on my walls for a reason. Because it doesn't jive with my public persona. No offense to people that do, because I know for some people it does. But even the Christian art we choose to put up on our walls is tied up in this identity question.
The hymnal shelf is the most prominently displayed bookshelf in my house.
And we are not surprised.
None. Zero surprise on my face right now.
All right, Erin, what do you want to talk about?
I am choosing question number 3 to dig into. One of the things that surprised me about this book was how glowingly positive Minter was about the export of secondhand goods from first world to third world countries, at least when it's driven by third world demand and entrepreneurship. Comes down hard on Chinese manufacturers flooding global markets with cheaply made new wares, but defends the rights of enterprising individuals to flood those same markets with used and reclaimed goods. What are the perspectives of those, especially current and former missionaries who've lived, served, and traveled overseas? Is his optimism about global secondhand economy justified? Or are there perhaps more negative consequences than he depicts in the book? We had two of our missionary alumni, actually, who really gave some thought on this and gave a lot of, had some pretty in-depth discussion. Emily McDermott, an LCMS missionary alumni, shared her experience living in West Africa. She said, the textile and garment making industries are also suffering. The author blames that one on China. And yes, there is tons of Chinese fabric. It's cheaper than the African and European fabric in price and quality. But in Emily's experience, she finds it hard to believe that with the quantity of secondhand clothes that she's seen in markets and street stalls, that the secondhand market is not at fault, too. She said, yes, the secondhand industry creates jobs, but it also causes job loss for fabric sellers and seamstresses and tailors. Locally sewn clothes are significantly more expensive than secondhand market clothes. She also said many Africans see American and European lifestyles and want to emulate that. For better or worse, secondhand or Chinese is pretty much the only way to do that for the average Togolese. And I thought that was interesting because in a way, and actually Heidi was the other one who really dug into this. Heidi Norton is also a missionary alumni who served for many years in Guinea. And she points out that there's very few of us in the U.S. who are wearing clothing 100% made in America, especially when you think about both the fabric and the manufacturing.
Yep.
Because that was what came
that
to my
was
mind.
Such a trenchant point. I thought that was amazing that she brought that up.
Yeah. And I think about this because I actually enjoy making clothes. I don't make everything that I wear, but at this point, there's definitely the vast majority of what I wear is things that I have made. But when it comes to trying, and so I feel good about that. One, I enjoy it, but I also know that the stuff that I make, it lasts a lot longer than the El Cheapo stuff that you can get. And I thought it was really interesting.
You know, Erin, there's a reason we all keep hinting at you to make us clothes.
It's true.
A little bit.
Yeah.
A little bit.
I mean, it's interesting. I also, when I have purchased clothes more recently, I actually chose to purchase it from a small maker. So she has her own business. She sells online. She employs local Americans in Philadelphia, I believe. And it's all made on a very small scale. And again, those things that I have, I've been very impressed with the quality of them, and I wear them. You're all very familiar with them, actually, because they're in constant rotation in my winter wardrobe. But it's not cheap. It's expensive, and sewing isn't cheap. For that matter, sourcing fabric. If you're gonna move outside of just cheap quilting cotton and polyester, you pay for that, and so it's not cheap. You end up so it's a challenge if you don't want to buy the glut of readily available, very cheap stuff that's new, then you either are going to pay more for the quality, which this applies to more than just clothes. Mm-hmm. So you're either going to pay more upfront for quality, or else you're going to look at secondhand. And I tend to myself. I'm a maker, so I just really enjoy it when I have the opportunity to make stuff myself. But otherwise, I do tend to look for either I'm going to save money to buy stuff that's higher quality that will last, or else I'll go to I have my bedroom furniture are antiques that I bought at an antique store. So they're already, many, many decades old, and I would expect them to continue. Whether or not it continues after me and has a life beyond that, I don't know. I don't have as much tied up in that, maybe because I don't have kids, and so I don't sort of think about who I would be passing stuff on to as far as heirlooms go and that sort of thing. I like the idea of people wanting seeing value in my stuff, but a lot of the stuff that I have, obviously, a lot of the value that I assign to it is really, I know that it's stuff that I have assigned the value to it because of the memories that I have with it. And I don't expect other people to have those same memories. I recognize that it's precious to me because this makes me think of that experience with that person and that relationship, things like that.
That's interesting that you bring that up, because that comes up again and again in the book, that people seem to have this, going back to this question of our identities being bound up in stuff, people have this deep need to know that their stuff, even when they're done with it, that someone will find it valuable. Yeah. Because it's this huge existential slap in the face when you put all your stuff out there and say, I don't need this anymore, but it's free, take it. Yeah. And everyone says, meh, I don't want it. Because that's a reflection on you. That's your identity that they're saying, nah, don't want.
Pass.
And it makes it very hard for people to let go of stuff because they're afraid of it being rejected and them being rejected. Yeah. No, I loved Heidi's comment about how few people wear stuff that originates in their own cultures, because exactly as you say, Erin, and I'm not a maker. I wish I was. I have a different set of gifts. But when I want to wear good brands, I got to go dig through the racks at Salvation Army to find them, because, with our family budget, it's never been in the cards for, me to regularly buy really high quality, well-made, enduring stuff. But when I go to the shop at the thrift stores, I'm looking for the good stuff. And that was a whole chapter title in the book, the good stuff. Everybody in the secondhand market is looking for the good stuff. And the good stuff is harder and harder and harder to find.
Yeah, I was struck.
So we're all digging for that.
Right. I was struck by how the sort of ripple effect of having widely available, very cheap new things is distorting people's view of what the basic price point should be. So Walmart could afford, he gave the example of Walmart dropping prices on jeans. And so now everybody has this idea that you should be able to get jeans for this much lower basic cost, and we're no longer willing, it seems outrageous to pay a higher cost for something because you can get that at Walmart for this amount. Why should you pay 5 times that amount elsewhere? I know, but it has totally distorted our just basic idea of what the average cost should be. And so anyway, I found that very interesting. It does wear out.
Yeah,
you're exactly right.
And one of the things that in my experience at that resale store is people would donate their Eileen Fisher sweaters and their BCBG Max Azria, like the name brand designer things that are going to cost you a pretty penny are also the things that are going to last you 5, 8, 10 years. That if you don't need to make any modifications because of changes in your body, that's not something that you're going to throw away after a season or two.
Unless it's unfashionable. And fashion, of course, plays a
That's
huge
true.
role in what people are buying and getting rid of at any given time. Okay, just to keep things moving, Sarah, give us a question. What do you want to talk about?
Okay, so I told you I wanted to talk about 1, but as we were talking, I kind of want to talk about 4 now because I think it makes more sense with our conveation.
Okay.
Hopefully no one's upset about the fact that I'm totally changing this last minute while we're recording. So number 4 says...
Not upset.
Okay, good. The question at the heart of this book seems to be this: what do we do with the stuff we no longer need or want? The answer we hear, according to Minter, is take your unwanted used item to this innovative, sustainable solution at no cost to yourself, and it will be reused indefinitely. Yet, it turns out, this is probably a naive and unrealistic hope, especially given the whims of fashion and the increasingly low quality and poor durability of the world's goods. How would we change our personal buying, owning, keeping, and purging habits if we could honestly admit to ourselves that much of what we now possess will be of little interest or use to others when we're done with it? In other words, how, if at all, will the awareness we've gained from this book affect the practical choices we make on a day-to-day basis? So I mentioned this earlier, just, talking through my initial impression of the book, that I have my own life cycle of clothing and shoes, especially. I have a closet full of secondhand shoes because as we're talking, I buy shoes secondhand, but that also means that they only last maybe a year because I get a lot of flats for work and I wear them. I wear them out until they have holes in them. So I end up buying shoes more often, but then what do I do with the ones that are now even more worn than they were when I bought them? If I donate, no one's going to want them. Do I throw them out? But then I'm contributing to the landfill. So now I have this problem.
It's a dilemma.
But then also, as we've reached real adulthood and we're #adulting, we're making other conscious, we, as in my husband and I, not like generally, we make these conscious choices to buy certain things new, and we pay a good price to get a quality item new because we want that item to last a long time. Right. So as I'm processing this, like we have these two separate categories of stuff that we purposely buy. We have this category of things like our new water filter that we got that was, a couple $100, and our bikes and some shoes, or things that long term we want to last a long time. We don't want to have to buy another one. So we purposely will go find something that is high quality, high dollar, made well, that will last. And then there's this other category that right now, at least, I put my own clothing into. I might change that, as I process this more, of things that I don't expect to last, that I don't think I'll have around for a long time. So I'm okay buying them cheaply or secondhand, or somewhat used and maybe marred a little bit, because eventually I know I'm going to just put them back out the door and send them back into this secondhand world. But I don't know if that's going to be the way that I will still look at that. And then there's this whole other category of all the other stuff we have in our house that we don't need in our house. And part of the problem is, what do we do with it? We can't give it to anybody. Nobody else wants it. But I hate throwing stuff away. So I'm not just going to put it in the trash can.
But at the same time, you pay a price for keeping it because you have to have a bigger place or more storage, or
it just piles on the dining room table.
Right.
People underestimate the dining room table.
It is a great storage spot. It really shouldn't be. But yeah, we're like, we need more shelving and we need more plastic tubs to put all this stuff into that we're constantly piling up.
No.
And and at some point since we moved to St. Louis, because moving with a lot of stuff is terrible.
Yes, it is.
At some point, we still have boxes of stuff from when both of us were in college. that we need to get rid of before we move again, because we are determined not to move with it again, because it's literally things we haven't looked at in 10 years. It's pointless, but we haven't gone through it yet. But now we're at a point now where we're not bringing in as much stuff anymore. And when things come into the house, we're making a decision on whether or not we keep it, or we just try not to bring stuff in that we don't need. We ask the question now when we see something on like Free Cycle, which is a fantastic place where you can get lots of stuff. We see something on Free Cycle and we're like, oh, that's really cool. I like that. But do we need it? Is it useful? If it's not useful, we probably shouldn't get it.
And that is so key, because it seems like as much as this book is about the afterlife of stuff, what the author seems to be encouraging us to do is think about the before life of stuff. Mm-hmm. To buy less, for one thing, to pay more attention to quality, and demand that manufacturers do a better job of making stuff that will last, whether it's for you or for your neighbor down the road who buys it from your garage sale. No one wants that stuff falling apart immediately, but that will happen from consumer demand of saying, we're not going to pay $7.86 for a dress that we know is going to fall apart after 5 washes. Right. We're not going to do it. But then also, letting go of your stigmas when it comes to secondhand. Be willing to buy it. Be willing to give it away. But if something is near the end of it, like I used to call my house, because we've always been secondhand buyers, and especially with kids, that's a really affordable way to do it. But I call myself the place where things go to die. Because we're oftentimes, by the time they get through us, no one's going to want them. So I just have to deal with that. But I'm trying to be more conscious too about how can I do a better job of not letting things die on my watch, of keeping them nice, of taking care of what I have so that I'll need less. And that is a message too. There's a big difference highlighted in the book between the American secondhand industry and the Japanese one. And maybe Erin can speak to this, where the Japanese secondhand industry is much more based on the idea that the stuff will look new when it arrives at the secondhand store. And I think in America, we're much less careful about that. But maybe we shouldn't be. All right, ladies, I think that wraps it up for this book. Except I do want to touch just briefly. My question that I really wanted to talk about was question number 6, which is the last question. We're circling back around to this idea of identity, because this book was not, even though, obviously it has some relevance for our church life, it's not a theological book. You wouldn't know, there's no religious or really a whole lot of philosophical insight in there. It's a journalistic reporting story. And we then have to take the stories and figure out the theological angle. And I think what I would like us all to take away from this is that stuff is given you to steward. It's not who you are. It's not, your identity is in Christ. The books on your shelf, sorry, Brie, the artwork in your living room, that's not who you are.
I'm crying a little bit.
Child of God is who you are. The rest of it is just accessories. And that, I think, frees us up to let go of we don't need to keep around these piles of stuff on shelves and in Rubbermaid tubs and whatever, because our identity, our memories, our past, present, and future, God's got that. And we can just rest in that. And then also there's this idea that this life is not the end. We can't take the stuff with us, but the resurrection is coming. Eternal life is coming. That's where our hope is. That's where we will reside. And so we can hold our stuff very loosely, but also be more mindful of how we can steward those possessions so that they can really be a blessing to those around us, whether they're here or in Ghana or in Japan or, wherever things end up, let that be a gift. So, all right. Are we ready for a new book?
Yeah! Let's pick it! I'm so excited.
Good. Me too. And I never know where these discussions are going to go. So I'm going to be as surprised as everybody when we figure out what we're reading next. Okay, I have, as per usual, I have 2 categories for you to choose from. One is fiction, one is nonfiction. So let me tell you, your fiction choice for this time around is literary fiction involving sisters.
Well, that seems
So
an
that's
obvious
category
choice.
number 1.
Wow, don't sound so enthused, Sarah.
The second is cultural criticism for a post-Christian society.
Oh man, they both sound so good.
That one's nonfiction. I wish the post-Christian society was fiction. It's not. All right, this is up for you three to decide. What are we reading next? And then I'll give you some choices within that.
I'm going to call fiction right
Category.
away. I'm too scared about the other one.
I'm really curious,
I'm not ready for that second one yet.
but I think I'm in the mood for a fiction one this time around.
Fiction it is,
Okay.
then. Fiction.
All right,
Give us
fiction
some
it is.
sisters.
All right, we have 4 books to choose from.
Oh,
and
man.
actually, I don't know how to, because literary fiction is sometimes hard to describe in a one-sentence elevator pitch. 3 of these books I've read. One of them Erin has read. She suggested it, so we'll put it out there. Book number 1, Erin's suggestion, would be Barbara Kingsolver, The Poisonwood Bible. Story told by the wife and 4 daughters of a fierce evangelical Baptist who takes his family and mission to the Belgian Congo in 1959.
Ooh.
So there's choice 1.
That sounds amazing.
Just wait.
Keep going. Keep going.
They're all going to be amazing.
Okay.
Who am I going to choose?
Since we had so much fun with Newbery winners with our first book, this other choice would be Katherine Patterson's Jacob Have I Loved.
I love that book.
Oh, you've already
Man,
read
you're
it.
making this really hard.
Okay, but reading a book with people that you've never read it before, I love rereading books with people I can talk about them with. So this would be 2 twin sisters. One is, this comes out a lot. One sister is the pretty talented, better sister, and the other one is telling the story. So
Why is that always a thing?
yeah, that actually is the theme of our third choice too. Only that one, the one I just mentioned, the Patterson book, takes place in one of the coolest settings ever, an island in the middle of the Chesapeake Bay.
Yes.
Which is the scenery, the setting there is like another character. Then we've got our next choice. This is a book I read when I was way too young to have read it and really gotten it. So I'm going to read it again at some point, and I thought might as well give us a chance to read it together. C.S. Lewis, Till We Have Faces, A Myth Retold. It's a retelling of Cupid and Psyche from the perspective of Psyche's big sister, who is, spoiler alert, not as pretty as Psyche is.
This is a really hard choice. Because I want to
and the
read
last
C.S.
one,
Lewis.
this one was
there's
inspired
4.
by Sarah, who said we should throw some Jane Austen into the mix.
Is it Jane
So
Austen?
perhaps the greatest sister novel of all time, Sense and Sensibility, is choice number 4.
I know my choice.
Okay, so now comes the hard part, and I'm just going to sit back and I will cast a tiebreaker if I have to, but you 3 be sisterly. And
I have an idea, Rachel. We should make a file in the Facebook group and just list all of the possible titles we've ever actually talked about
that's
reading.
a good idea, that it becomes
Because we may not be able to ever read all of these in the book club, but they all sound so good. So I want to put them on
Yeah.
a reading list, or we need
And
to
I
we need to create a Goodreads for the ladies'
I
lounge
should
or something.
put a disclaimer out here that not all of these books that we'll read are necessarily strictly orthodox
Right.
in all of the perspectives. They're chosen because they give us something interesting to think and talk about.
Right.
I would not put all these books through doctrinal review. As much as I respect and appreciate that process,
They will not pass.
because they're meant to be conversation starters,
Right.
not to provide you an authoritative source of doctrine.
Right.
So then that makes it sound scary. No, these are just good books.
Yeah. Well, I vote for Jane Austen.
All right. Let's see how this goes down.
Or
Erin?
C.S. Lewis.
Or
Or the first one.
Jacob Have I Loved. That's the one you don't even want to do. I don't.
Or that one.
Yeah, Sheree, what are your thoughts?
I love Jacob Have I Loved. It's such a great story. I don't know. You go.
Well, I have read, I believe, 3 of the 4 books.
I'm not surprised.
You said Poisonwood Bible is meaty?
It's meaty.
I want to read that. I'm just
do
gonna
love-
I'm going on my to-read list right now.
I do love meat.
Yeah. So it's not an easy read, but it's really excellent.
Let's do that one.
So, and I'll tell the listeners out there that I really enjoyed it as an audiobook. So, they've got a really excellent narrator. If that works better for your life to be able to read by listening, it's a great one. So there's that. I also just recently finished Sense and Sensibility again, and it was one of those where I was like, I was getting near the end, and I couldn't remember how it was different than the Emma Thompson movie, and I was like, did they change this plot point? They did slightly change it, and so it was even better as the written book.
I will just say, if we don't choose Jane Austen, I'm still going to read it. So we don't have to read it together. I'm on a Jane Austen kick right now, and Emma the movie is out. So,
and actually, I think I've actually read all 4 of them. I just don't remember Jacob I Have Loved as vividly by the description. I read so many Newbery Award. That was one of my mom's super summer challenges.
I haven't read that one.
I read a
so
lot
good.
of
so
good.
Really, I'm okay
I've
with
read
any
it,
of them.
So I'm
We are
pretty
so
sure
out
I'm
of time,
4 out of
though,
4.
so I'm going to just cast
Okay,
my...
all right.
Yeah,
do I
you be
need
the
to
tiebreaker
cast my
then.
tiebreaker?
I think
Okay,
so.
it sounds like let's go with Jacob Have I Loved. It's a little,
What?
it's not quite as, let's do it.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I left. I'm gonna have to buy a new copy because I think I
That's
lost my
funny.
other one. It's been so long since I've read it. So hopefully it's as good as I remember it being when I was a teenager. This is another one that I think reading as an adult will be an entirely different perspective on.
Yeah.
So are we happy with our choice?
Yep.
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
All right.
Yay.
Wow.
Jacob Have I Loved. Let's go hang out in the Chesapeake Bay for a while.
All right.
Clam chowder.
Clam chowder.
That was not any accent.
Nope.
Decipher.
Chowder. So we'll have to start making a full list of these though, because we get all these great suggestions, and all of it. I don't know. All of us have our favorite books too. The next book club book is Jacob Have I Loved by Katherine Patterson.
Katherine Patterson.
It's going
who
to be
is a
wonderful.
Christian author.
Wonderful.
So brings some sort of subtle theological overtones. Like you're not going to find a lot of preachiness in her books, but you will find some deep philosophical questions.
Like the book title. All right. So everyone, find your copy of Jacob Have I Loved. It shouldn't be as hard to get as Secondhand was for a lot of you who are on a 3-month wait list at the library.
Oops. Very true.
Wah, wah. And then we'll come together again in a couple of months and talk about it. And this should be a good one. Apparently, it's a well-loved book. So
Let's do it.
there's that. Thanks, Rachel, for all of this book discussion. This is going to be fun. It's always great to dig into these books that we read together. All together in the Lutheran Ladies Lounge. Find the Lutheran Ladies Lounge Book Club in the Facebook group. We'll have an event posted so that you can RSVP to that event, and then all of the discussion will happen in that event. I think that worked fairly well this time with just a few technical difficulties because Facebook is Facebook. Find all of our episodes at kfuo.org/Lutheran Ladies Lounge or on your podcasting app. You're listening to the Lutheran Ladies Lounge podcast. I'm Sarah.
I'm Erin.
I'm Brie.
And I'm Rachel.
Views and opinions expressed on the Lutheran Ladies Lounge podcast may not represent the official position of the management or ownership of KFUO Radio, the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. The Lutheran Ladies Lounge is produced by KFUO Radio and available at kfuo.org or wherever you get your podcasts. Join our community on Facebook in the Lutheran Ladies Lounge.